Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Thunder. Hey, how's it going there? You know, I was perusing the internet, as we all do, and I was on the website CBR, and their best writer, Brian Conan, had, Brian Conan? Cornyn? I never know how to pronounce anybody's name. My apologies, Brian, but you are the best writer they have at that website, and I'm going to steal one of your articles, because I've felt the same way for years. And it was basically how there's a kind of a current trend over the past couple of decades, I guess, of taking shades of gray characters and just turning them into villains and basically just wrecking the characters in the process. The biggest example of this has got to be Amanda Waller from DC's Suicide Squad. She was created by John Ostrander. I'm not sure who gets co-creating credit, if it's John Byrne, because I believe she first appeared in the Legends miniseries, or if it's Luke McDonald, who did her in the regular series, The Suicide Squad. But either way, when she was first created, she was basically, when she was first debuted, she was kind of a shadowy government mover, and she had the idea of leveraging supervillains into doing black ops missions for the United States. Now, clearly her means were, not on the up and up, but her goals were. So she always had this duplicitous nature to her. And John Ostrander often had her wrestle with this nature and what she was doing with her life. She was this fascinating character. She was just this ordinary woman, and she would, get right into faces of superheroes and supervillains and basically get her way, especially with the supervillains. So I just, loved everything about this character. But as she started to show up in TV and movies, they just kind of turned her into a government thug until just kind of she's a villain. And the recent stories of DC Comics, she's basically a villain now. She's operating under the guise of the government, so to speak, but there's no more, moral ambiguity or struggle of is the thing she's doing to achieve the ends she wants, is that okay anymore? Now it's anything goes. She'll murder anybody to get her ends. And quite frankly, I think the character is worse for it. I don't know why anybody would be interested in Amanda Waller now. She's just a two-dimensional thug now. For myself, another character who was basically created around the same time as Amanda Waller was Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord was created by Keith Giffen and GM DeMatteis, and I guess it goes to Kevin McGuire as the artist. And he was kind of originally presented as your typical 80s sleazeball corporate guy. He's the CEO of his own company, and I don't think they really explicitly said anything. It was basically implied that he did nefarious things to get to where he was in the world. Then he had a run-in with some New God tech, and it's kind of hard to explain, and I don't kind of want to get into all of it all, but basically he needed the Justice League to help him out. And so he kind of forced his way into the Justice League as some sort of corporate sponsor or handler for the Justice League, getting them UN status and stuff like that. And then over the years, he slowly evolved from being, a corporate sleazeball character into a guy who was really trying to do the right thing. He always had to fight. And again, like Amanda Waller, he was always kind of at a struggle a little bit. It's like, he wanted to do the right thing, but, he had natural tendencies, and he knew he had, skills and options that would allow him to do things that weren't exactly on the up and up. And he even bumped heads with Amanda Waller a couple of times, and those were always great to see. But then DC set forward to their countdown to the Infinity Crisis, and they basically made him just a full-on supervillain. He mind-controlled Superman, killed Blue Beetle by shooting him in the head, and he's completely uninteresting. I give slight credit to Wonder Woman 1984, or it's just Wonder Woman 84, I think, the movie, where they tried to get some of that moralistic struggle back into the character. It's like, yeah, he's a bad, vain, superficial guy, but he still kind of wants to do the right thing. And then he jumped off the deep, then he jumped into the deep end, and with a little help from Wonder Woman kicking his butt, he kind of came back to the side of the angels. So a little credit for that movie there, where in the comic books, he's just a straight up villain. And again, worse off for it. I mean, who cares about Maxwell Lord now? He used to be interesting. Now he's just a mustache twisting villain. The other characters that Brian had mentioned were Jeremiah Arkham in the Batman books. He was kind of like the guy in charge of Arkham Asylum. And again, he had a moralistic, conflicted job and personality, and now he's just a villain. On the Marvel side, he mentioned Henry Gyrich, who was a government liaison to the Avengers, and they turned him into a villain too. Just turning characters into villains on some level to me is just really boring and lazy writing. I mean, I'm sorry, you're all just a bunch of hacks. You're going to turn Robin into a villain? No, that's inspiration, not. You're going to turn Bucky into a supervillain? Oh, well, gee, that's genius. Why don't we do it to Lois Lane? Lois Lane's now a supervillain. To me, on some level, it's almost the ultimate form of like navel gazing. It's like you're not adding anything to the storyline of these characters. You're just spinning a wheel and rearranging the toys because you can't think of anything interesting to do with them. The last one Brian mentioned was Steve Dayton. He was, can't think of the proper way to succinctly say him, but he was a character from the Doom Patrol. He was a later character brought in as a villain. He was a later character brought in as a new hero. And then he showed up in the Teen Titans, and basically they've gone back and forth on turning him into a villain. And again, it's just tiring. Reminds me of an old sci-fi show. I don't know if you are any fans out there of Andromeda. Andromeda was a show starring Kevin Sorbo, the guy who used to play Hercules. And it was about a spaceship that got caught in a time loop of some sort, or it slowed time around a black hole, I think, or something like that. Anyway, when it managed to escape from this, it was like thousands of years in the future, and the future wasn't that great. And so the main character was trying to reestablish the Starfleet Federation, or whatever it was called in that show. And one of the main characters was this cast out Nietzschean. Nietzscheans were a race of people who genetically modified themselves and, believed in, survival of the fittest and might makes right. And so this guy was cast out, and his name was Tirasani. I think that's what the character's name was. And he was a cool character. He was a tough guy who was always looking out for himself. But hanging around the main character, Dylan, he slowly started to become a hero. He started to get altruistic tendencies and stopped looking out just for himself. Well, then in the fourth season, they just turned him into an out-and-out villain. And it was just, stupid. Even the actor hated it and pretty much walked off the show. He finished his contract to get killed, but it was just one of the worst things I'd ever seen. And it's like, I just don't understand why writers think that's a good idea. Now, to play devil's advocate for a wee moment, the only time I thought that this was kind of an improvement was during DC's Zero Hour. They were doing all their Zero issues, kind of coming up with new backgrounds for all their characters. They created a character called Triumph. He was a superhero who supposedly was the guy who created the Justice League. And I don't remember the story too well, but somehow we forgot all about him. But so we had this guy Triumph, and, He was supposed to be like one of the first superheroes. I think he was in Justice League Task Force for a while. But nobody really cared about him. He had kind of a dumb origin because, he was created for a stunt. It was like, oh, it's the 0 hour. Or, I don't know. Just think of something. So, they just scribbled triumph on a piece of paper and, not much to him. Well, years later in the JLA, Grant Morrison brought him back as a disgruntled superhero who felt the Justice League had turned his back on him, and so he basically kind of turned into a villain. He still kind of wished he was a hero, but he kind of got too self-absorbed in his own, righteous anger and turned into a villain, and that's the coolest I ever saw the character. So I guess it can work. But Grant Morrison kind of did that to a character who really had nothing going for them in the first place, where with all these other characters, they were all coming from really good places, and the writers just messed them up by turning them into lame villains. I often find it kind of funny, too, because people always say that, oh, the writing in comic books is more sophisticated now. Well, gosh, now when I look at those storylines, they already had sophisticated characters, and then these modern writers are just turning them into two-dimensional villains. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that so-called modern writers are messing up some cool characters by just turning them into villains? Or do you think this is good for those characters and they're evolving in a positive way? As characters, not as, good people. Or is there any other character out there you think got worked over in a bad way by some writer trying to, do something cool? Let me know who it is. Till then, thanks for listening and watching. And if you could be so kind to like and subscribe, I'll keep talking. Take care of yourself.